Hello, and welcome to ChatDPS, where this week we're joined by Adam Squared, Adam Green, and Adam Cunningham. Robert is here as usual, trying to give us his advice around what's going on in the world of legals. And of course, you've got me to put up with as well. Hey, so straight into it, it's been a busy week. And in the last week, we have seen the operator getting down and dirty and making examples of people. Robert, I'm going to lead straight to you on this one about Fig. So what's the story with Fig? I think this is to do with ASIC and regulators making examples of people, correct?
So we just wanted to touch on this one briefly. I know we've got other hot topics to get onto, but I think it's worth giving a little bit of attention to this one. So Fig Securities, as of last Monday, so it's pretty recent. They were fined $2.5 million, plus they had to pay $500,000 towards ASIC's costs. And this is in relation to cybersecurity failures. So this is the first time that ASIC has successfully brought an action for cybersecurity failures in relation to Australian financial services licensee obligations under the Corporations Act. So ASIC previously tried this with RI Advice, and they were, I guess, partially successful in that whilst they didn't get a penalty awarded against RI Advice, ended up paying $750,000 towards ASIC's costs last time. But this time they have actually got a penalty as well awarded against Fig. And so this is like a landmark case, a little bit like last year under the Privacy Act, when the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner got a penalty under the Privacy Act against Australian clinical labs. That was a first. Here's another first. And so I think what you're seeing is two of these regulators, ASIC particularly going after the financial services licensees. That's their focus. So they've tried with RI Advice. They got a partial success. They've got a more full success against Fig, and they've also got one in the works against Fortnum Private Wealth, which we're expecting to hear about sometime in July. So they're very clearly going after financial services licensees. That's your first stream, and then your second stream is the Information Commissioner going after anyone covered under the Privacy Act. Now they're looking at I guess you would call them the smaller players. So we know that there's Optus and there's Medibank and there's Latitude, and they're working their way through the courts, and these are huge, very complicated cases. These ones, smaller organizations. But I think what ASIC are trying to do, and what the Information Commissioner is trying to do, is set examples of certain players within different industries. And the idea is, to try and put them up as an example, as a deterrent to other organizations, to put them on notice. And I'll just quickly read a couple of quotes from the Deputy Chair, Sarah Court. So she's actually going to be the full chair of ASIC from the beginning of June. And so some of the things she says is ASIC expects financial services licensees to be on the front foot, and there's the emphasis there, on the front foot, every day to protect their clients. Fig wasn't, and they put thousands of clients at risk. Now, we don't have to go into the details about what happened with Fig, but I think it's the language, it's the messaging. So ASIC is saying entities that fail to maintain proper cybersecurity controls risk regulatory action by ASIC, as well as exposure to malicious exploitation. So the clear message is ASIC are looking for other examples to find, to make an example of, to try and get correction in this particular sector. The Information Commission is going to follow up in other areas as well. And you can't be passive about this. This is the key thing. You have to take action. Particularly if you're in this particular financial services sector, you should be looking at your risk register. You should be looking at your governance framework. You should be looking at your controls. You should be looking at your training. You should be looking at the information you hold, and you should be going, well, I don't want to be the next one. I don't want to be the next cab off the rank after Fortnum. I need to be proactive about this. I need to be on the front foot. That's the expectation that's being set. And there is a clear link between the obligations. It's Section 912 of the Corporations Act, which covers these financial services licensees. Clear connection between that and actually having good cybersecurity practices. So you can't outsource the risk. You can't be passive. You have to be on the front foot. So that's the clear message to take away.
Yeah. So, what's the CISO perspective on this, guys? Because must be, I mean, it must be a bleeding nightmare trying to run that tightrope between regulation and technology implementation and budgets and PR and everything else. I mean, are there any words of wisdom?
I'll let you go first, Adam.
It has to do with being proactive in your job. So a lot of CISOs are stuck in the compliance lens and being reactive to what comes out of audits constantly. But to be on the front foot, you have to be proactive. It's about putting those controls in place that tell you about something before it becomes an issue, and being able to report that efficiently and effectively. And I think for ASIC, they're looking for those proactive controls, which is a very big shift, especially in financial services, which is very much focused around compliance, to be able to shift into this proactive or strategic lens, which is what they're looking for. They don't want to so much see that you understand your risk in the past, but that you're looking at what your risk in the future is. And at the moment, that's a gap for a lot of us.
Adam, any follow up on that?
Yeah. So obviously, your job's not hard enough as a CISO, right? So we've got to add extras in there. But it is interesting in such a heavily regulated industry, especially around financial services, because they've got CPS and they've got they've got the ASIC breathing down their neck at the moment. Then they also have obligations around SOCI because they're seen as critical infrastructure to our nation. So there's a whole lot of compliance. And then there's also, now you've got to be proactive. Well, it's not now you've got to be proactive. We've always had to be proactive. But I think it goes to that whole point that security is not just the CISO's job now. It's everybody's job. It's a culture thing. And that, it goes back to what Robert was saying. You make sure you got your frameworks in place, make sure you've got your training in place, make sure you've got all the right coverage in place as far as protecting client data, client information, client privacy. And then, add to that all the hot topics we're about to talk about for the rest of this session, that then stack on top of just the compliance piece. So it's there's a reason why they say the average CISO's lifespan's about 18 months in a role now. It's like it's
a tough gig.
Straight under the bus.
The meat in the sandwich, you guys, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose what it does actually highlight is the fact that compliance is one thing. Data protection is a completely different arrangement, completely different beast. Which takes me on to our next subject, which is sort of surprising to me, and we're getting all sorts of different statistics around this at this moment in time, and we're talking about CISO priorities for this coming year. And we've heard numbers like 63%, 73%, 80% from another source, and they're all talking about API security. Now then, for the uninitiated, maybe what you should do, or what we should be doing, is telling people what an API is to begin with and why they're important. I mean, who wants to take that one on, Adam?
So I made Adam go first last time, right?
Yeah, you go.
I'll make him go first again. So the API side of things is, and I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on what the acronym stands for, because we use it all the time, but it's like application protocol interface. Is that right?
There you go.
We use these bloody acronyms all day.
3 levels of knowledge.
And me not smart, me lift big weights. So we use APIs for everything, and the more that we're using LLMs and AI everything now, there's a lot of integration between different software stacks. So like an easy example for everyone to understand is like your Xero accounting software having a plug-in to like client relationship management or CRM. So like say HubSpot or Salesforce. So that's an API where they're pulling data to and from each other. Xero would also have an API into your business bank accounts so that you can see what the incomings and outgoings are and your invoices through your systems. So those APIs, they're everywhere, and they're sprawling, and they're a big part of our software supply chain. And as we look at what our third-party risk is and how federated our systems are, API security it's been on everyone's mouths for around about 3 to 4 years now. People have really started to pick up on the conversation of late. So it was IT Guru was one of the publications that said 73% of CISOs say that in 2025, because obviously we can only look in the rear view when it comes to data. 73% of CISOs said that they will be looking into API security and management as part of their defense protocol going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really good conversation to have because this is about being proactive, right, Adam Cunningham? It's about how do we actually make this conversation real for somebody, and what does it actually do?
Absolutely. I think on the subject of what an API is for the layman who isn't technical, basically the reason why we have APIs is because the way we speak is inefficient from a computer perspective. So it translates that into a way for a computer to be able to understand complex queries quickly. And so you have them as an interface between systems to handle complex queries and to get information back and forth. And initially it was really easy because it was one system to one system or one API to one system. And over the last few years, what Mr. Green was talking about just before, now it is almost an entire farm of APIs contacting each other to then get information from a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, to then translate that into our inefficient human speak. And that is why it's starting to become a real problem because attackers are utilizing the trust model between all of these APIs to do things maliciously or find information they shouldn't be able to get. And because of that, it's becoming a focus now because we've become heavily reliant on it. Because it's so efficient, more and more tools have been built that way to be more cost effective. And it's exploded to a point now where it's become forefront.
Right, okay. Robert, have you got any thoughts around, sort of like proliferation of this? I mean, AI comes to mind in terms of some of the user examples that we've seen just recently. I mean,
Yeah.
that must be why CISOs are really on top of this moment in time, and it must be part of the compliance conversation.
Yeah, I think agentic AI, when it gets going properly and gets more adopted at the enterprise level, is going to blow the current risks out of the water. So at the moment it's a risk-based discussion. So, like everything, how dependent on your organization are APIs, how interconnected are they with other services that you operate? Where does that flow into in terms of your supply chain? And what risks do you carry on that basis? And then how does that translate into what mitigations you need to put in place, what controls you need to put in place? So, you need to understand what APIs you're using and how are they secured, and if they get breached, what are you going to do to essentially segment and protect the organization and reduce the blast radius, things that we talk about. So once you've addressed it as a key risk, so we talk about identifying what information you hold, identifying what APIs you use, and what impact they might have if they get breached. So you kind of work through that process, and then it's about figuring out what do we need to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Technology, process, training, people, all those things we talk about. If we tie it back to Fig, again, it's about, okay, let's be proactive about this. Where are areas of risk, and what proactively, how do we get on the front foot to actually secure and mitigate these particular risks? That's what it's all about.
This goes into that proactivity, sorry, Nick, around architecture. So architecture being a governance tool, not an assurance tool, and having proactive governance over the architecture that you're putting in place in the future, as
yeah.
opposed to having architecture as a blocker for a project because you didn't meet a standard, which is assurance.
Yeah, and I think, very simply from me, I think it's around, sort of understanding what the problem question is before when you're posing it into the business, because these things are being put into place so that businesses can get more efficiency or greater business efficiency, better quality business outcomes, better quality, decisions, I suppose. And they're reliant upon the ability for systems to be able to speak to each other in order to be able to glean that level of, quality out of the systems, out of the data that they've got. So yeah, look, it's a 3-step forward maybe 75 back sometimes.
Well,
But
what I would say about efficiency is we're getting back to, again, we keep sort of banging the drum. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Business efficiency should not be what drives things, but we know that it does. But somebody should be going, okay, you want to connect APIs to this application, this SaaS product, whatever it might be. What are the risks around this? So can we explore that before we actually put this into production and turn this thing on? Because if you haven't thought this through, if you don't actually go, okay, do we need to write a policy around this? Do we need to write processes around this? Do we need to architect it properly? Do we need to secure it properly? Do we need to test it properly before we actually roll this thing out? If you're actually having those conversations, this is governance, this is oversight, and you document this, then you're on the front foot, and then hopefully, if things do go wrong, then you can actually demonstrate to a regulator that the things you were doing were proportionate to your business, your resources, your risks. These are the things you need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes into your library of documentation that you need in order to be able to achieve, to demonstrate to the regulators and so on and so forth that you're actually there to be serious and you're there to be taken seriously.
This is what I was talking about with architecture and governance, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I was hosting a fireside chat in a cyber threat intelligence symposium very recently. I think it was in December. Maybe it's January. Look, there's that much going on, and the overarching theme that we kept hearing was software bill of materials, or SBOM, and it was like government regulators and financial services providers and critical infrastructure providers saying, if you can't, from now on, with a third-party supplier questionnaire around wanting to be a new supplier and also existing suppliers, if you can't provide us with a software bill of materials for what's under the skin of your fancy named product, and we're not going to name any vendors, but some are excellent at naming everything their own fancy words so that we don't know what's under the skin. So if you're not able to provide the software bill of materials, you don't get past the first checkpoint. And that goes back to what you're saying around architecture and governance. It's not just, here, what are you doing for me? What's my outcome? But how are you actually doing that? And what is actually under the skin?
It's a really good point that you raised, because, you raised the point about SBOM. Now, then, I'm not being funny or anything, but as an industry, we're really good at acronyms, aren't we? And quite a lot of us use the acronym and then, like I say, 3 levels of knowledge, never heard of it, know what the acronym is, actually know what the thing does. It's sort of like 3 levels of knowledge and so on and so forth. But you've brought up SBOM, which is your software bill of materials. There's now a CBOM as well, which is your certificate bill of materials.
Which is my favorite as an Irish person.
I'm English and I know exactly what you're talking about, so it's all good.
So when they start asking for a firewall bill of materials, what are we going to call that one?
Yeah, we can go down that particular route as well. So that's kind of an interesting one, because certificate lifecycle management's come up in conversation quite a bit at the beginning of this year. And the reason for that quite clearly is the fact of the decreasing term of validity of certificates. And to be able to manage that, once you've gotten into, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying that it takes them, and it's not a huge organization, maybe, sort of like less than 150 people in it. And they're saying that it takes about between 400 and 600 hours a year to manage their certificates. It's a big job. So if you're a bigger bank, or if you're a bigger, entity, or even a mid-sized entity, if it takes them that long to do it as a relatively small organization, you can only imagine what a mid-sized organization is going to be going through. So 1,000 hours, for certificate management and so on and so forth becomes a very, very onerous task, because it's not as if it's not important, right? Certificates go down, your call center doesn't work. If you don't call, you can't speak to your customers. It's kind of like a bad thing. That's so certificate lifecycle management coming to the fore. I don't know if there's anybody who's got any ideas on that one.
It's back to architecture again. It's absolutely back to architecture again, 100%. The issue with this, and what I found that causes the most problem, is every time you do certificate management, it's the first time you do certificate management. And this has been an issue for a million years, and we don't build systems with that in mind. So all of a sudden they'll go, oh, it's 800 hours of work because I have to go through the production change process because the service can't go down. And they'll have this long list of the reasons why it takes ages, which could have been fixed at the very beginning for a very small amount
More
of
amount of money.
This is
and
what
all
we
this
say
issue
about,
just goes away.
This is what we say about the architecture piece, where it's like bake security in from the start, because it's, you know,
Yeah.
we throw away numbers like it's a tenth of the price if you bake in security at the start. But when you actually do the maths on the manpower, the time, the retrofitting, the rolling back, like, we're probably being optimistic when we say, I mean, optimistic as in, yeah, it's probably more than 10 times the amount if you try to retrofit it later, especially if we're looking in not just a business IT like context, but if we're starting to look into like industrial control systems and operational technology. And another buzzword that we were hearing a lot of last year, Internet of Things, like everything's Internet of Things now. So
Yeah.
it's like, try retrofit security to that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the green boards, that's a sensor for moisture, and that's all it does. What are you going to do?
Having IT sit down with security rather than just throwing it over the fence and saying, here you go, secure that. And the security guy's going, fix what?
Yeah. Oh, so Adam would have been in this same scenario that I've been in, where we're sitting in the room doing advisory at organizations that are like, we're a hospital, and we go, yeah, you're the IT department for the hospital. You've got 700 cameras on this precinct. When was the last time you were involved in a purchasing decision around a security camera? And they're like, why? It's a security camera. That's for facilities. And it's like, yeah, that's a fairly risky threat vector for you. Nah, it's on the facilities maintenance part.
You're doing me.
It's like, yeah, but what's that screen over there? The one that I can see that says milestone, that's showing all the cameras flashing around the building.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they link into here so we can, run our security operations center and our guardhouse. Yeah. So these things are all interconnected, all part of your stack, all part of your architecture, and you have to consider the security of these things from day one. Now, there is a very easy way to approach this stuff if you do it right from the outset. And I always talk about points of ingress and egress rather than going, well, how do we put a piece of security software on every single camera? Let's look at where every single camera connects into and put the security software there. That's a
convergence.
pragmatic
So
way.
important.
Looking at the convergence or the confluence, right? So, but yeah, again, you bake this in after the fact, and you're walking around these sites, and you're like, okay, you've got Hikvision, you've got Bosch, you've got Honeywell, you've got friggin' Awa or whatever they're called, and it's just. There's one like Delula, or does Delula something to do with the hula in Hawaii? But anyway, it's all these different names for all these different bloody cameras. And then you go, well, now you've got device sprawl, you've got brand sprawl, you've got management console sprawl, you've got different DVRs or digital video recording software. And it just goes on. And this is like, it's not just industrial control systems now that have this stuff. It's people who run sites with cameras on them.
It's the crossover, right? Because this is physical security that you're talking about, and we're actually talking about, there's a lot of data there, right? It's a huge amount of data that needs protecting as well.
Petabytes.
So it is
petabytes.
Yeah, it just needs to be talked about, in organizations. Oh, that's John's job. No, it's not John's job at all. John's got no idea what you do.
Or even like, you got the cameras sitting somewhere where there's a console, and the camera, if it can be tapped into, they can look over the shoulder, see the username and the password.
And where's the biggest area of break-in at the moment? Through CCTV, right? The last one, I am very mindful of the fact that we've kind of gone on a bit, but there is one last area, and that was brought up last week, and that was around email as an attack vector. With the idea now that AI is being introduced for the reasons of good rather than reasons of evil, we're beginning to talk to people who have got very real concerns about what their staff are actually doing, particularly in the larger organizations, and what they're actually doing. It's not always malicious. It's just, sometimes it's just not the brightest thing to have done. Email as an attack vector we know about, but What are the, I mean, these are very real. I think these things need underlining a little bit in terms of behavioral and cultural arrangements within business so that people actually get it. And it's all about communication, and it's all about ensuring that people know what the tools of the trade are there to do. So email protection, particularly now with AI. Adam Cunningham, can I come to you first around that? There's a thought?
Yeah, so the problem is, or the surge that's come out with this, is the entry level is so low in attack, or even a malware attack via email. So because of generative AI, it becomes very, very easy for literally anybody to start running an attack. So we've seen an explosion of that. And unfortunately, because anyone can do it, it's very hard for the tools that you have in place to block every single one of them, because each one is subtly different. So that's where the increase has come from. And it's been a long time since the original ideas changed. There was a lot of work done by criminals to make sure that certain things were a little bit off about the email. It might be a spelling here, it might be a font there, it could be something slightly off center. And the idea of that wasn't, oh, they don't speak English, it's terrible. It was an actual ploy on your psychology to make you think something was wrong, to help you click. And they found that it was 40% more effective to make you click if you thought something was wrong and there was a green thing to make it better. And those things now are starting to move away as people have changed their outlook on email specifically, to now they're utilizing AI specifically to make exact copies and replicas of what the real thing looks like. So instead of worrying about people being uneducated and making them feel like they need to click a thing, what they're doing now is they're making an exact replica of what you would see from your bank or from the tax office or from your CFO, and they're sending that instead, and that's getting a lot more clicks. So the problem is, as over the years, we have taught people how to see the original scams, which has then opened up a fact that we haven't said to people, that any email can be a scam. Look for these things. That's definitely a scam. Everything else is fine.
Yeah. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if we start adding some spelling mistakes into the emails, it looks more human now, because as Adam was saying, like it is just the barrier to entry is so much lower now, because you can now go across to a ChatGPT or the like and say, produce me an email. Like I'm in Queensland in the air conditioning industry, and I'm talking to my client and they owe me money, and use the right language, and probably shouldn't be giving a script for how to do this stuff, but like it is that easy to just overcome this stuff. So now it needs to be, and I think I mentioned this on our chat last week, is we need to instill a culture of vigilance, not a culture of paranoia. So there needs to be like an inclusive environment around phishing campaigns. Phishing campaigns inside organizations, I think, are more important now than ever before as part of the training and awareness arsenal. And I think that the best way to do it is just to say, don't trust anything. If you're not expecting the email, like I'm known for picking up the phone and calling someone and saying, did you actually send me that email? Because, as we see stats of 92% of organizations have experienced a business email compromise. And that's frightening. And that's really hard to work around. Now, granted, a lot of organizations use a business email relay. So those email relays can get hit, and then that gets caught into the stats of 92%. Like what looks really legitimate these days is really hard. So I'll confess to something really stupid, and that is that, so I do phishing as a service for some clients of mine, and they give me an email box for their company. So I've got like a whole bunch of different email boxes, and then they'll come through, and I sit there and I'm pretty prescriptive about how I design these things, because it is gamified, and I do tell them it's going to come through, it's going to look a bit like this. And I had one that I did, and it was like you said this, you need to approve. There was a complaint about your comment on Glassdoor about your company, and I'd recently looked at Glassdoor because I was trying to see how it all looks. So then I had to actually put in a review so that I could use Glassdoor to see how it all looked. And I've started clicking on it. And went, no, I just got myself with my own phishing campaign. But that one had 100% hit rate. And instead of people going, oh no, I'm in trouble, everyone actually saw the entertaining side of it. And then as a result, we saw a huge uptick in reporting. And there was a lot of false positive. There's a lot of reporting of real emails, but it meant that there were quite a lot that they saw where we were like, that does look actually quite suspicious.
Yeah.
But the capture rates are alarming. If you look at the capture rates of the main email filtering products, they're blocking hundreds of millions or billions of emails a day. But just for a standard size organization, it's like thousands of emails a day getting blocked, tens of thousands.
And Robert, there have been some really interesting stories coming out around, sort of like where these emails have been blocked, they've been put into, they get put to one side, and then somebody says this email's come through for you. It's very dodgy. It's got all of these signs in it, and it's telling us that it's bad. No, says the executive director. I'm expecting that email, opens it, and then finds that actually he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got a surprise.
Let me I'll just speak briefly. People, process, technology, people. So phishing exercises, great. I think what's also good is like regular awareness training. What are the trends? So phishing is trending, particularly with the use of AI. Either if you can't do it internally, get someone in who's going to tell you what the latest trends are, and let everyone know, let all the people know what the latest trends are, so they're up to date. So that's being on the front foot. Process. If you're saying accounts payable or some other position of power, what is your process? If you get an email supposedly from the CFO saying please transfer above $25,000 or $50,000, whatever your threshold is, follow a process, which is like Adam says, maybe make a phone call, maybe go see that CFO in person. Don't just assume that the email is sufficient. Have checks in place in your process, which will mitigate that risk of you sending $50,000, $100,000 to some cyber criminal. So process, technology. We are all aware there are plenty of solutions out there. Some of them now have built-in AI capabilities, so they pick up on behaviors, they pick up on patterns. So there's solutions out there you can look at as well. So focus on at least those three things to try and mitigate your risk around BEC.
That's perfect. What a great way to finish. Gentlemen, thank you so much for that, for all of your input this week. It's been a really fascinating conversation for me. Thank you very much. That was ChatDPS for this week. See you next time.
Thank you.